Hello everyone, Professor Leis here. In this video, I'm going to read through and explain the prompt for major essay project number 3. So let's go ahead and get started. In On Confronting the Unknown, Richard E. Miller and Ann Jurecic write that the writing prompt, properly conceived, is an invitation to embark into unmapped worlds, to improvise, to find unexpected beauty in the challenges that arise. In this essay project, we are challenged to write a research-based argument of at least 8 full pages that explores a particular aspect of a topic that genuinely interests us. Typically, in a research-based essay, we may be tempted to choose a position in a debate and find evidence to support our position. This model is the basis for the 5-paragraph essay, a model we are no longer using. However, as Miller and Jurecic explain in Habits of the Creative Mind, we know that practicing argument as debate produces writing that isn't persuasive or compelling or interesting to read. So in our classes, we ask our students to think of essay writing as a speculative journey. What's the difference? When you write speculatively, you begin not with a predetermined destination, your thesis, but with the goal of answering a question or solving a problem. You consider different routes to get to this goal. You do research and rethink your plan. You learn more and more. You write, make mistakes, and head off in new and unanticipated directions. You make discoveries. Your paper is your attempt to come to some kind of answer to your question. How are you putting pieces of information together to create new meaning? How are you connecting different ideas together to create new ideas? So I want to pause and explain this a little bit, elaborate on these ideas. This essay project is kind of the culmination of all of the different skills that we've been reading and learning about so far this semester from Habits of the Creative Mind. And so this essay project, I understand that those 8 pages at first can seem very, very daunting, and that's why we are spending the remaining time we have together in the semester working on this project. So we are working on it in pieces, so by the end it will have reached those 8 full pages, but we'll be working on it all along the way. But in order to make this experience something that's not going to be completely overwhelming and torturous, is that you should select a topic that you truly care about, something you are genuinely interested in, one that makes questions come up for you, one that sparks your curiosity, captures your attention in those extraordinary ways that Miller and Jurecic talk about in Habits of the Creative Mind. So that's really important. I can't stress that enough. Do not choose a topic because you think it's going to be easy or you think it's something that I want to read about, because in the end, those things are going to be much more difficult for you because you're not going to enjoy it and it's going to be that torturous experience. So don't do that. Choose something that you truly care about. Now, when we go into this, though, we want to make sure that we're not approaching this in that argument as debate way, where we already have a position about something. I think this, and then we just try to find evidence to support that position. So let me go find a bunch of sources that confirm my belief. That is not going to be a learning process for you because you're not going beyond your quote-unquote comfort zone, right? The things that you already know. You're not using writing as a mode of learning for you, which is exactly what we're trying to practice by engaging in these different ideas that Miller and Jurecic talk about in Habits of the Creative Mind. So that's really, really important. So it's important that we begin in a state of not knowing, meaning we have questions that we're trying to discover possible answers for. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue on here. The goal for this writing project is not to try to convince or persuade your readers that your position is right. When released from the burden of trying to persuade our readers, we can then use our writing as a way of learning for us, which ultimately is one of the most important purposes of writing. This will also influence the tone you take in your essay. Seek to build an invitational tone, not a confrontational, adversarial, or arrogant tone. So just to comment on this, when we're trying to convince or persuade people that our position is the right one, we often go in with that kind of aggressive, confrontational tone where we're trying to, force our position on somebody. And usually what ends up happening is we turn our readers off. Nobody likes to feel like they're being kind of force-fed an idea or yelled at, right? And I think that's one of the problems that we face in our country and maybe even globally in these kind of current times where people are not really they undertake the burden of trying to prove that their position is right, and so they force it on people, and people are turned off by that, right? But in the end, it's also not a way to use writing as a mode of learning, and that is, again, the utmost important goal that we have, to try to use writing as a way of learning for us, for discovery for us. So let's continue here. Begin by doing some exploratory research about a topic that interests you, an event, a concept or idea, a cultural phenomenon, or potential solutions to a problem. As Miller and Jurecic suggest in their book, begin in a state of not knowing rather than committing yourself to a claim you came up with before you've done any curiosity-driven research. After a while, questions about this topic should arise. Craft an open-ended question about your topic. Open-ended questions can't be easily answered and require careful research and consideration. Embrace confusion and complexity. Don't shy away from the gray areas of an issue. So let me comment on this a little bit. So you'll recall this quotation comes from the essay in Habits of the Creative Mind called On Writing to a Question. And the general premise of that essay, that short essay in the book, is that we can use open-ended questions as a way to drive our research and writing process forward, because when we begin in a state of not knowing, it means that we don't have the answer to an interesting question, and so therefore we need to try to figure out an answer. And to do that, we need to research, we need to write, we need to reflect, we need to follow these quote-unquote white rabbits down those rabbit holes, see where they take us, make those connections. There's a whole host of different activities and processes that go into this, but it's important that we don't just commit to a position on something and we just try to find sources to confirm that, because again, that is going against the whole point of this. Now, this is something that I'll continue to stress. We want to embrace confusion and complexity. Don't shy away from the things that confuse us. When we embrace ideas that confuse us, we're more likely to learn from them because we're trying to understand them, right? So I want you to understand that the issues that you will delve into are complex, right? Life is complex. We're all complex thinking human beings with a whole network of complex ideas, right? Rarely is something so easily defined in these kind of rigid black and white categories, right? Usually there's a lot of different shades of gray between. So don't shy away from those things. Get into the murk, so to speak. So in order to do this, we have some challenges laid out for us. We're challenged to incorporate material from at least 8 credible and relevant texts, 5 of which should be found using the library's online databases. Gale ebooks and opposing viewpoints are good places to start. They're useful for providing background information and pointing us in the direction of other sources, but also use EBSCOhost to find some of your sources. How can you work with the words of others to promote thinking new thoughts? To help us gather sources for this major essay project, we will create an annotated bibliography which has its own prompt. And there's another video where I explain the annotated bibliography. Before committing to a topic, think about your own interests in the world. What are your career goals? What are your hobbies? What sparks your curiosity and imagination? Topics that we have a personal stake in tend to be more interesting to research and write about, and consequently, more interesting for our audience to read about. Rather than researching the topic generally, however, try to find a specific conflict, issue, or question within this topic. We want to be as narrow and specific as we can for such a short paper. Now, I didn't mean that last statement as sarcasm. In the grand scheme of things, this is a relatively short paper, and so it's not enough for us to solve all the world's problems. In 8 pages, I hate to break it to y'all, but it's just not enough. Because the world's problems would have been solved by now if we could do that in 8 pages, right? So what we're trying to do is just get really specific with an idea and learn as much as we can about it in order to try to address some sort of question or maybe develop potential solutions to a problem or to explore a concept or a phenomenon more deeply and to look at its complexities and nuances. No, let me comment on this a little bit more. So I really want you, when you're trying to figure out ideas, potential topics, you don't need to think of it in a schoolish way. And what I mean by that is a lot of times when we're tasked to write a research paper, we're like, okay, well, I got to pick some kind of consequential, controversial issue. And while, of course, there are a myriad of consequential and controversial issues to focus on, there are also things that, you know, maybe aren't that consequential but are just interesting to you. So if you are interested in comic books, for example, you might choose to develop or delve into a specific issue within comic books. I don't mean like a specific like magazine issue, or that could be something, but you know, specific aspect of comics, for example. Or if you're interested in fashion, or if you're interested in food, or potentially you know, music, or you know, any of those things. If it doesn't seem like it's very serious, you can still write a very serious essay on something that is not serious, if that makes sense. So if you're not really sure, talk to me. Send me a message on Canvas and we'll try to brainstorm. But the cosmos is your playground, okay? Well, let's go ahead and look at a couple of parameters here. Note, there are certain topics that we may not write about. Not because they are unimportant issues, but because they tend to lead us into dogmatic or ideological corners that are hard to get out of. These topics include whether abortion is moral or immoral, or should be legal or illegal, whether gun control is good or bad, whether we should have the death penalty, whether immigration is good or bad, and whether a God or afterlife exists, among other things. The arguments for these issues tend to be repetitive. If you have a particular angle regarding one of these topics that you think will lead you into new territory, let's talk about it first. All topics should be approved before you begin the composition of your essay. So, like I said, it's not because these issues are not important. Indeed, they are incredibly important. And that's why people speak so fervently about them, regardless of which, you know, side of the issue they fall on. But what ends up happening a lot of times is we end up arguing from dogmatic corners or ideological corners that it's hard for us to learn new things in this way. And if we're trying to use writing as a mode of learning for us, when we go into topics such as these, we're usually a little less open to learning different ideas that might conflict with our worldviews. And so that's why I want us to avoid those topics. Again, not because they're not important. Indeed, I encourage you to research and write about these topics in your own lives, but for this major essay project, I want you to focus on something else. But like I said, the entire cosmos is your playground. With the exception of these few topics, the entire cosmos. So that's a lot of stuff you can focus on. I want to hear your topics. So if you're concerned or you have questions, send me a message on Canvas and we can brainstorm. This essay project is your chance to put into practice all of the concepts we've been reading and learning about so far this semester, and to challenge our capabilities as writers, students, and thinkers. Be sure to review your notes and reread important selections we've covered from Habits of the Creative Mind, Resist your familiar habits and practices as writers. Try something new and exciting. Follow your curiosity. Take risks. And please attempt to have fun while composing this essay. Really, if you attempt to have fun with this, I guarantee it'll go a lot more smoothly for you, especially if it's a topic you truly care about. So again, I want to underscore that, the importance of that. And again, go back to your values. What do you value? What do you think is important? What's important to you? And use that as a starting point. You know, think about your career goals. Is there something that's connected with your values and your career goals? Maybe a hobby or pastime that you enjoy, or just something that you're concerned with in the world. You know, there's, again, a whole myriad of potential topics. So have fun with this. Have fun with this. I'm going to end this video right now and pick it up where I will then go through and talk about the different challenges. So stay tuned, everyone.